Hey everyone, thanks for joining this video. This time, this is a video to talk about automation of flow deployments. So basically how to automatically deploy a flow that you built in a dev cluster into a production cluster and make this as automatic, as easy as possible. And with as little manual operations as possible. So that's really the focus today. 3 years ago, I did a webinar. There is a video on YouTube to talk about this topic, but we brought some nice improvements in NiFi, so I felt like it was a good time to make a new version of this video. But in the description of this video, I will add a link to that other YouTube video in case you want to check it out. Okay, so let's set up the stage. I will have a dev cluster and a production cluster. My dev cluster is going to be a 3 nodes NiFi cluster with a NiFi registry dedicated to the dev environment, and I will have the same in production. 3 nodes NiFi cluster, a NiFi registry instance. The thing that is special about my setup is that each NiFi registry instance is configured with the same database backend. I already published a video about this in the past. I do think this is making things much better and much cleaner. So this is my recommendation, if this is something you can do on your side, to have all of your NiFi registry instances connecting to the same database. This way, whatever you are doing in the dev cluster will be available in the production cluster, and you can set up appropriate permissions via Apache Ranger to make sure this is read-write access in dev, but read-only access in production, and so on. So that's really a recommendation. I think it's the easiest setup, but there are other options depending on the requirements you may have on your side. So that's the context. And then what's the objective? So basically, as I said, automatically deploy a version of a flow from development to production. So you're done with building a NiFi flow. It's ready in dev. You commit the version into the NiFi registry, and you want to push this into production. So that's great. And whenever a new version of your flow is available, automatically deploy it into production. This is really like kind of having like a DevOps model where developers, whenever a flow is ready, they can say, okay, this flow should be promoted up to the production. So that's really what this is about, what we want to achieve. What are the challenges to do that? Well, a flow is associated with a parameter context that is used to externalize values of properties in your flow definition that are likely going to change between environments. For example, if you have an NiFi flow that is interacting with a Kafka cluster, the Kafka brokers are probably going to be different between your dev cluster and your production cluster. So you are going to use a parameter for your brokers, Kafka brokers, so that you can change the value for this parameter between dev and production without going into your flow and changing things in many places. You want to have this parameter context where you externalize the parameters and you have a single place where you need to change things when you deploy a new flow in a new environment. Some parameters may be sensitive, like if you have credentials, some keys, things like that. And when you commit a flow that is containing sensitive properties or sensitive parameters, we won't be keeping the values for security reasons. It means that when you deploy the flow in production for the sensitive parameters, there won't be any value. So you need to go in there and type in the values for your sensitive parameters. The issue is that you may want separation of duties, meaning that the person in charge of deploying the flow may not be authorized to know about this credential. Like if you have a password to access a database, the person deploying the flow maybe should not know about this password. Okay, so you want separation of duties, and finally, you may have like a ton of parameters. So in the video that I'm linking in the description that I made 3 years ago, I was saying, okay, in addition to your flow definition that is going through NiFi Registry, you could have like a separate file that is kind of a dictionary with key values for representing all of your parameters. And when the flow is deployed in production, you could go through this file and using the CLI set the values for each parameter. This is an option. You can do this. This is not easy. A lot of scripting and so on, but that's an option. That's what some are doing, and that's what I was mentioning 3 years ago. But now we have this new concept of parameter context provider, which is a way for you to say, okay, for this parameter, all of the parameters included into this parameter context, sorry, for this parameter context, all of the parameters, we are going to fetch the parameters of this parameter context from an external location. So the steps are, let's go define my parameter context provider that is going to connect to an external location. It can be a database, can be a secrets manager, it can be a vault, whatever. And we will say, okay, fetch whatever is available in this external location and create parameter contexts out of it. And then you can use those parameter contexts. This is extremely useful because basically the kind of dictionary file that I was mentioning just before, now NiFi can be in charge of doing all of this work. So basically you just say NiFi, please go fetch my parameters in this location and refresh my parameter context and have the flow reference the parameters from my parameter context. So that's really what parameter context providers are about. This is a very nice new feature in NiFi that is making your life much easier when it comes to this topic of automating flow deployments. So that's it. I will now go to the demo and show you how all of this is working and how you can leverage all of this to automate flow deployments. For this demo, I'm using Cloudera Public Cloud. I have my environment, my CDP environment in AWS, where I have my 2 NiFi clusters. So I have my NiFi cluster dev, NiFi cluster production, each one with a NiFi registry instance, both NiFi registry instances configured to access the same database, RDS instance in AWS. And I have a Kafka cluster because for the demo, for my use case, I will have a NiFi flow interacting with the Kafka cluster. So that's really it. And that's what I will be using for this demo. I set up the right permissions in Ranger so that I can do all of the things I want to do. That's I won't go into the details, but I will mention some of the policies I needed to implement to do what I'm doing here. Also, something that we are going to leverage is the concept of scripted hook in the NiFi registry. So this feature is basically whenever something is happening in the NiFi registry, please execute this script. That's what this is about. And this script is whatever you want. So that's what we are going to use. So in my dev cluster where I'm developing my flows, I said that NiFi registry should have this scripted hook and execute my script whenever something is happening. So whenever I commit a new version of a flow and so on. I will get to this in a minute, but basically this is the script that will be in charge of saying, okay, this flow version is ready to go in production and I want to deploy it in prod. So please do it. So this script that I'm going to call is actually leveraging the NiFi CLI to interact with the production cluster and do everything like upgrade the flows, take care of the parameter context, and so on. So my script that is running in the dev cluster should be able to interact with the NiFi cluster in production. So I set up everything like this. That's where some ranger policies need to be adjusted, but this is very minimal changes. So that's what we have. I'm going to go into my NiFi cluster now. Okay, so let's go to my NiFi cluster. So this is my NiFi cluster in dev. I added the banner here so that you can see on which cluster I am. So I have this process group. This is the use case I'm going to use for this demo. So process group, my use case one. If I go in its very stupid use case, something that you would not do, but just for the purpose of the demo, this is good enough. So I have a tail file processor that is going to tail the NiFi log files. So basically NiFi is looking into its own log file. And then I have a query record processor where I used a parameter for the query that I want to execute. I will show you what's the query, but basically we are filtering the logs to just keep the logs with errors or warnings. And then for those logs, we send those logs to a local file on the NiFi node. So clearly not something you would like to do in a real life scenario. You don't want to read logs and put the logs on the same NiFi node. Doesn't really make any sense. But this is my initial version. I want to start with this and then improve my use case into something that is more, let's say, real life. So let's look into a parameter context provider. So that's the first step. So we will go into controller settings, and here we have this new tab here for parameter providers. So in this case, I'm adding an AWS Secrets Manager one, but if you click here, you have multiple options. AWS Secrets Manager, database, environment variables, files, GCP, HashiCorp, and we have Azure Vault as well. So in this case, I have the AWS Secrets Manager one, and if I go into the configuration very quickly, I'm saying, well, let's fetch all of the secrets that are matching this pattern. So in this case, my use case, anything dev, into my region, and then I'm using the credentials of my NiFi VM. So in this case, I made sure that the role associated to my VM has the permissions to access the secrets, okay, and read access, obviously. So that's it. And now if I go into my AWS console, I created a secret, my use case one dev, in which I added just one key value with a query and select star from flow file where level equal 1 or level equal error. So if I go back in NiFi and I look at my parameter context provider, I can now fetch the secrets. So there is only one found with one parameter query. This is creating parameter context with this value, and this is not sensitive, so I don't keep it. So that's it. I already did this, so the parameter context already exists, but basically it's creating the parameter context, and it's available here. If I go here, we can see query and select star from flow file, blah, blah, blah. So, and here we can see that this is coming from a provider. And if I click here, this is taking me directly to the corresponding provider. So that's it. And then in query records, I'm referencing my parameter. So that's really my use case. And it's ready to go into production. But this is a net new use case that I'm deploying for the very first time. And my recommendation is that when you want to deploy your use case for the very first time into production, you probably don't want to have this fully automated. The reason is that when you deploy a use case for the very first time, Maybe you need to deploy some files on the NiFi node that are referenced by your flow definition. Maybe there are some things to take care of in terms of network and so on. So my recommendation is, well, when it's the very first time you deploy a use case, you probably want to do it with someone looking into it, just to make sure that you are not going to break anything. But then for, let's say, any new version you want to deploy, then yeah, we want to automate all of this. So let's do it. Let's deploy this in production. So if I do this, and here on my right side, I have my NiFi cluster in prod. You can see it's empty. There is nothing. Here you can see the banner. It's the production cluster. Okay. So I'm going to just do this bit bigger. So here, the first thing that I will be doing is to go into my parameter providers and set up the parameter provider for my production cluster. So here in this case, I said, okay, fetch all of the secrets, my use case, anything prod, because obviously the values in my secret are not the same in production. As we said, like the parameter context is containing parameters that are likely going to have different values depending on where you deploy your flow. So that's really it. And then here I can fetch things and I can say, okay, create the parameter context. Let's give it this name. And I have just one value in my secret, and this is query, and it's not sensitive. So I click apply, and this is going to create the parameter context. So now I have my parameter context here, which is my use case one prod, and that's it. Just one thing I didn't mention is that I have created my secrets, my use case one prod, and I get the key value for query and the associated value for it. So I did it before. Like this will be part of the things you need to do when deploying the use case for the first time. Like create the secret for production with the values you need. Okay, so that's it. Then I will drag and drop a process group. I would say import from NiFi Registry. This is my use case one, and here this is initial version. This is version 15 because I did many tests with it. But let's assume that version 15 is the very first version that you want to deploy in production. So I take this one. That's good. Something that you need to do in the version I'm using right now, but this will be fixed in NiFi 121. That is going to be released really soon. Is the association of the process group with the parameter context. So right now, when I drag and drop my process group, if I go in parameter context, it's actually created my use case one dev that is coming from the secret manager, the AWS Secrets Manager provider. That's not something we want, obviously. So here in this case, I would say configure, and I want to use my prod parameter context, and that's it. And from here, I can delete my dev parameter context if I want. So doing this won't be required anymore, starting with NiFi 121. Right now, there is, I mean, in the version I'm using, we are expecting the name of the parameter context to be the same as the name of the secret. So since my secret here is my use case one prod, we are expecting the parameter context name to be the same. This is no longer the case in NiFi 121. So in dev, instead of having a parameter context that is called my use case one dev, I could say, okay, my parameter context is just called my use case one. And we will have the same name for the parameter context in dev and in prod, even though they are not linked to the same secret. Okay, so I hope it was not too confusing, but until NiFi 121 is out, you have to do this step where you fix the association of the process group with the parameter context. So that's it. I switch to my correct parameter context, and then I can just say enable all controller services and start. And that's it. My flow is deployed. This is working, and that's it. I have my data flowing. My use case is in production, and this is working nicely. So that's good. My use case is in production, but now I'm going back to dev, and I want to make some changes, and I want to be able to push automatically changes into production without any manual steps. So as I said before, to do that, we are going to use, well, I could start things in dev too. So this is dev, this is prod. So now, yeah, as I said, we want to leverage the scripted hook of the NiFi registry to automate flow deployments. So as I said, I configured my NiFi registry instance in dev to, as soon as there is a new flow version, check if this should go into production, and if yes, do whatever is required to push things into production. So let me switch to my NiFi registry cluster. So I created a directory automation where I just put my deploy sh file, which is the script that I want to execute. So let me show you what is included in this file. In the description of the video, I have a link to that script so that you can play with it. So basically, we have all of the parameters, and then we have the script. It's very straightforward. So first, we want to only care about the events where a new flow version is created. As I said, the script is going to be called whenever something happens in the NiFi registry. So it can be when a bucket is created. It can be for many reasons. In this case, we just want to execute that script when this is create flow version. Then we are going to look into the comment that is associated with the version of my flow. And here, this is like, this is my decision. You can do whatever you want. But in my case, I'm going to automate my flow deployment only if the comment associated to my flow version is containing the keyword PROD ready. Okay. The next step is to do two things. So I will maintain a mapping file. And this mapping file needs to be set up only when you deploy the use case for the very first time, okay? So here, in this mapping file, I'm, well, keeping a mapping between my flow definition and the process group and the parameter context provider. So the reason why I'm doing this is because for a given flow that you have in the NiFi registry, you could have multiple instances of it in production. Because a flow can be generic enough to be used across multiple use cases just by changing parameters. So for a given flow in the NiFi registry, you could have actually multiple process groups that are this instantiation of the flow. So that's the first thing I'm retrieving here, is to retrieve the process group UUID for my flow. And then I'm retrieving the parameter context provider associated to it. This step is actually optional. I could say, okay, let's go through all of my parameter context provider and refresh everything. But however, we want to be as efficient as possible, and we can imagine some scenarios where you have tons of parameter context providers. So in that case, I'm adding a mapping so that I'm just refreshing the parameters associated to the specific parameter context provider I care about. But again, this step could be removed, and we could just go through all of the parameter context providers and refresh all of those. So the next step is, okay, upgrade my process group to the latest version. So that's it. Then here, there is, okay, refresh everything that is associated with my parameter context provider. So we fetch the parameters, we apply the parameters, and here we define a naming convention to say, okay, all of the sensitive parameters that are prefixed by sense underscore should be considered as sensitive. This is important to have this naming convention. You can choose the one you want, but this is how we say, okay, if there are new parameters, how do I know if this is a sensitive parameter or not? So that's what we specify here. Then we enable all controller services, and then we start everything. That's it. That's really straightforward. As you can see, it's just a few lines, but this is doing the job. So as I said, now I'm going to edit my mapping file. And here, I'm going to remove this because it was a previous attempt, but I have the flow UUID that you can retrieve in the NiFi Registry UI. Here in production, I can see that this is the UUID of my process group where I instantiated my flow. So this is here what I'm going to add here. And then the parameter context provider. So I will go here, controller settings, providers, here, settings, and here I retrieve the UUID. And that's it. So that's my mapping file. So this is something also that you should take care of when deploying your flow for the first time. Okay, and that's it. That's all I need to do. Now, if I go back here and let's say I want to make some changes here. So let's just increase a bit here. So let's say here I want to have put file for my errors logs, so errors and warnings, and I want to add another put file for original. Okay, this is not really making sense. This is probably not something we would want to do in real life, but this is just for the example. Okay, so here I have my new flow here, and here this is working. So if I refresh a bit, I should see some data flowing into both relationships. So here, this is, yeah, okay, this is because I didn't, here I said fail, should be replace. But that's it. Basically, my flow is ready, and I could send this to production. So what I'm going to do is, okay, commit local changes. This is my flow with another put file, and this is prod ready. Okay. And that's it. I save, and this is what I'm sending into my NiFi registry. Okay. Now, as you can see here in real time, without me doing anything, everything is applied in production, and we are upgrading the process group to the latest. So this is adding the processor, and if I refresh, everything is started here. So I have errors because we have the same UUI, the same name that is used for both files. So it's trying to, I mean, two processors are trying to write into the same file. But that's all right. We don't really care for the use case. This is just showing you that without doing anything, changes were applied into production. So I could say, well, okay, so actually it was not a good idea. Let's stop this. Let's stop this. Okay. I want to basically revert things. Let's remove this. Okay, so this was not a good idea. Let's terminate here. Okay, this is my flow. This is much better. Commit local changes. Fix things, and prod ready. Okay, and apply. So here, same story. You can see here that now my flow is committed into production and into the NiFi registry, and you can see it automatically applied in production. Okay, so that's great. But you could say, yeah, but you didn't change really a lot of things in your flow. Let's look into a use case where I'm adding new parameters and things like that. So that's a very good point. So let's stop this. Let's stop this. Let's remove the put file. Let's remove the put file processor. And instead, let's say publish to Kafka. So basically, all of my errors and wants logs from NiFi are going into a publish Kafka processor. Okay, so here properties, relationship, terminate, and terminate. So in this processor, I want to externalize the broker. I want to externalize the topic name. Here, the reader and writer, I can specify here. Security protocol, it's going to be SSL, SSL, plain for SSL. The username and password, I'm going to externalize this. And for the SSL context service, I can just use the trustor that we provision automatically and apply. So now I know that I need a few parameters. So I will go to my secret in dev, and I will add my my key values here. So I'm going to add a few. So we have the brokers, we have the topic, we have the username, and then we have the password. And as we said, we have a naming convention for sensitive properties. So here, I'm going to add the lists of the brokers of my Kafka cluster that I created. I'm going to add the topic that I have, but in this case, this is a topic dev. Username, I'm using my own, but you would probably provision a dedicated service account for your use case, and then my password for this user in this environment. And that's it. I click save, and this is my my stuff in dev. So now I can go back to NiFi in my dev cluster. I could go to my parameter context, go to the parameter context provider, fetch, and here I can say, okay, here are my new parameters, and only sensitive password is a sensitive parameter. So it's going to fetch everything, update my parameter context, and now here I can just go there and reference my parameters that are now available. So here, brokers, here topic, and then username here, and password. And that's it. Now this is valid. I can start everything. So I can start everything, refresh, and the data is successfully sent into my Kafka topic. So if I go in the SMM UI here, that is the monitoring UI for Kafka in CDP, and I go on to my dev topic here. We are not seeing anything here, but we will get some numbers here in terms of monitoring in a few minutes. I have log size because I already sent a few logs in the past, but otherwise we will see here data in, data out, message in, and so on. So it's taking a few minutes to refresh the metrics, so we will get back to it. But basically, this is my flow, and this is now available in dev. This is working. This is what I want to push into production. Now, as you saw, I had to add a few parameters. So before I push this to production, obviously, the first thing I want to do is to go to my secret in production and add the parameters. So basically, I would say to whoever is in charge of production, hey, sorry, but I need to push a new version into production, and I need some credentials to access the Kafka topic in production. Please, can you add those parameters into the production secret? So in my case, so here's the data. So in my case, I go to the secret production and I add the parameters. So here, I'm going to add same, like the parameters, but this time for the production, right? So it's not exactly going to be the same. So I have my brokers. You would set up the brokers for your production cluster, then the topic, username, and then since password. So the topic will be my production topic. So here will be NiFi errors prod, my username, and my password for this environment. And that's it. So I save, everything is available in my secret in production. So I can say, okay, now I can push things into production. So here, I can go here, commit local changes, and change to Kafka destination, prod ready. So my flow is now using additional controller services, a completely different processor. It's using sensitive parameters, net new parameters, and so on. So that's what I want to send in production. So I click here, save. My version is now added into the NiFi registry, and this is what I have in dev. If I go in prod and I refresh, here everything is automatically deployed. And this is working out of the box. But here, if I look at the parameters, I have my parameters from production, as you can see here. So I just automatically pushed everything to production without doing anything manually. And my flow is running in production. So that's quite cool. And if I go in SMM, and I look at my prod topic here, so NiFi errors prod here, it will take a few minutes, but same story here. I will see the data going in, and if I have consumers, I will be able to see a few things, the producers, consumers, and so on. And some interesting metrics and monitoring information. But that's really it. So as you can see, in dev, I just need to commit my changes, specify a specific comment with a keyword, and the scripted hook of the NiFi registry will take care of deploying everything automatically. So that's the demo. Very quickly to summarize, as I said, in NiFi 121, we are fixing two things. The parameter context name doesn't have to be equal to the secret name. So the thing I was mentioning where I have to manually change the assignments between the process group and the parameter context is not required anymore. So that's a step that you don't need to do. And we fixed the bug also when you have your parameter context provider that is creating a parameter context that is also used with inheritance of other parameter context. So that's also something we fixed. And something we are looking at right now at Cloudera is to add the option when you drag and drop a process group to say that you want a dedicated parameter context for this process group. Because right now, when we check out a flow definition, we will check if there is a parameter context with the same name that already exists. If yes, we will use that parameter context. If not, we will create a parameter context. But as I said before, in some scenarios, you may want to have one flow in your NiFi registry that is going to be instantiated multiple times because you will use different values for your parameters, but the flow will be the same. So in that case, you want one parameter context per process group. So that's something we are adding. So if I summarize, in dev, you create your initial version, then you go into production, you deploy this net new use case for the first time, You create the parameter context provider. You import you click the import button so that it's importing the parameters and create the parameter context. You check out the initial version of your process group. You change the parameter context assignments, and you add the mapping information in the file that is containing the mapping and that is going to be used by the scripted hook. And then whenever you have a new version in dev, if you have net new parameters in your flow, make sure that the parameters are added into the secret you have for your production. Otherwise, you have nothing to do, and that's it. So I hope you liked it. Honestly, I find this quite cool because you can see the changes applied automatically between dev and production. As I said, the script is super straightforward. You could do things a bit more advanced. For example, you could first push your flow into a pre-production cluster where you will be running some tests, and based on the results of the tests, then promote to production, sorry. So you could do things a bit more advanced. You could also include some rollback concepts into the script. The script is basically completely up to you. So you can do things quite advanced if you want, but the demo is showing you that in just a few lines, you can already automate everything. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's useful. Feel free to drop some comments in the video, and see you next time with another one. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.